June 13, 2025, a date that will be remembered as a turning point in the ongoing legal and political crisis gripping Los Angeles and the nation. Today, a pivotal legal decision has just shifted the landscape in Los Angeles, sending shockwaves through city streets and the halls of power alike. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has issued a temporary stay, halting a lower court's order that would have removed federalized troops from the city. This emergency ruling came after hours of heated legal arguments and mounting public pressure. For now, thousands of California National Guard troops and U.S. Marines remain on the ground. Their mission, originally intended as a response to escalating civil unrest, continues under the direct authority of the federal government. The presence of these troops has become a daily reality for Angelenos, as armored vehicles and uniformed soldiers patrol neighborhoods and key intersections. This move poses a direct challenge to President Trump's authority, keeping the military presence intact as legal battles continue. For the administration, it's a crucial reprieve, allowing federal operations to proceed while the courts weigh the constitutional questions at stake. The appellate court acted with remarkable speed, intervening just hours after a federal judge had ordered the National Guard back under Governor Newsom's control. The rapid response underscores the urgency and high stakes of the situation as both sides scramble for legal advantage. That lower court order was clear. President Trump, it argued, had overstepped constitutional bounds by federalizing the Guard without sufficient justification. The debate over executive power and states' rights has now reached a fever pitch, with legal scholars and political leaders weighing in from across the country. But the Ninth Circuit's intervention has created a legal limbo, leaving the fate of the deployment uncertain. Lawyers on both sides are preparing for a fierce battle, and the city's residents are left waiting for clarity as the legal process unfolds. The core dispute, state sovereignty versus federal power, remains unresolved. Yet the immediate effect is unmistakable. Federal operations in Los Angeles continue, and the city remains under a heavy security presence. For many, this is a moment of anxiety and uncertainty, as the balance of power between state and federal authorities hangs in the balance. A full hearing is set for next Tuesday, promising another dramatic turning point in this high-stakes saga. Legal teams are preparing their arguments, and all eyes will be on the courtroom as the future of federal intervention in Los Angeles is debated. Until then, federalized troops hold their positions and the city remains tense, caught between ongoing protests and the unfolding courtroom drama. The atmosphere is charged, with both sides bracing for what comes next. The legal fight is far from over, and the outcome will shape not only Los Angeles but the future of federal intervention in American cities for years to come. The military deployment in Los Angeles was triggered by a wave of ICE raids, a move that shocked many residents and sent ripples of fear and uncertainty throughout the city. The sight of military vehicles rolling through familiar neighborhoods was a stark reminder of the gravity of the situation. These coordinated raids began on June 6, 2025, targeting undocumented immigrants in multiple communities across Los Angeles. Families awoke to the sound of boots on their doorsteps, and many watched in disbelief as neighbors were detained and taken away. News of these aggressive actions spread rapidly, igniting outrage and fear. Activist groups and community leaders quickly mobilized, organizing citywide protests that drew people from all walks of life, immigrants, allies, and concerned citizens alike. What began as small, scattered demonstrations quickly swelled in size and intensity. Within days, thousands of Angelenos flooded the streets, united in their opposition to federal immigration enforcement and the heavy-handed tactics being used. Protest tactics ranged from peaceful marches and candlelight vigils to more disruptive actions, such as blocking major freeways with banners and staging mass demonstrations in key intersections. Sit-ins outside federal buildings became a common sight, as activists demanded accountability and called for an immediate halt to the raids. As the protests grew, so did the tension. Some demonstrations turned confrontational, with isolated incidents of vandalism and heated clashes between protesters and police in riot gear. The city's atmosphere became increasingly charged and unpredictable. The LAPD responded with force, declaring unlawful assemblies in several neighborhoods and making hundreds of arrests. Many protesters accused the police of using excessive force, further fueling public anger and drawing national attention. While the unrest has been significant, it hasn't reached the scale or violence of the infamous 1992 riots. This time, the focus remains squarely on federal immigration policy and the visible presence of ICE in local communities, rather than broader civil unrest. Protesters demand an end to what they see as unjust and inhumane raids, arguing that traditional politics and elected officials have failed to protect vulnerable families. Their chants and signs call for compassion, reform, and a new approach to immigration. The underlying frustration and sense of injustice ensure that, military presence or not, the conflict in Los Angeles is far from resolved. The city remains on edge, with both sides bracing for what may come next. President Trump's response to the protests was swift and forceful. A major military deployment to Los Angeles. 4,000 California National Guard troops were federalized, removing them from Governor Newsom's control. 700 Marines from Camp Pendleton joined them, with 200 already stationed at key federal sites. Their mission: protect federal property, not patrol city streets. The sight of Marines and Guard troops around federal buildings has heightened tensions and raised the stakes. The deployment, costing over $130 million for 2 months, is a rare and controversial move in American cities. Their presence is meant as a deterrent, but it's become a flashpoint in the city's ongoing unrest. The deployment has ignited a fierce political and constitutional battle between President Trump and Governor Newsom. Newsom calls the move an overreach, insisting the situation is for state and local authorities to handle. He argues the National Guard should not be federalized without his consent, calling it a violation of state sovereignty. Trump defends his actions as necessary to protect federal property and personnel, accusing California officials of losing control. This standoff reflects a deeper ideological divide over federal versus state power. Both leaders are entrenched, leaving Los Angeles residents caught in a high-stakes power struggle. The conflict is as much about constitutional principles as it is about the events on the ground. The dispute quickly moved to the courts, with California suing to block Trump's federalization of the Guard. The state argued the protests didn't meet the legal threshold for rebellion, making the president's move unconstitutional. Federal Judge Charles Breyer sided with California, ordering the Guard returned to Newsom's control. The Trump administration immediately appealed, arguing the president has broad authority to protect federal interests. The Ninth Circuit's emergency stay keeps troops in place for now, but the core constitutional question remains unresolved. A full hearing is set for next week, and the case could reach the Supreme Court. Legal experts say the outcome could set a major precedent for presidential power and federal-state relations. The legal battle has turned a local crisis into a national test of America's checks and balances. The rules of engagement for federal troops in Los Angeles are strict and limited. Without invoking the Insurrection Act, the president has confined their mission to protecting federal property and personnel. Troops cannot patrol city streets, make arrests, or engage in crowd control. They're strictly defensive. Marines and Guard members can secure federal buildings and respond only if those sites are directly attacked. This limited mandate creates tension and confusion, especially as protests continue nearby. The LAPD remains the lead law enforcement agency, with federal troops supplementing, not replacing local police. State officials argue this dual structure is inefficient and risky. For now, the military remains a powerful but constrained force, waiting to see if their role will escalate or end. The current deployment recalls past moments of federal intervention in Los Angeles, but with key differences. The 1992 riots saw far greater violence and destruction, prompting the governor to request federal help under the Insurrection Act. Then, federal troops had broad law enforcement powers and state support. Today, the governor opposes the deployment, and troops operate under limited authority, unable to police the streets. Federalizing a state's National Guard against the governor's will is extremely rare, last seen during the Civil Rights era. Those interventions enforced court orders and protected civil rights. This one is about federal property and legal authority. The lack of clear precedent makes the current situation uniquely contentious. The deployment is neither a response to total civil collapse, nor a move to enforce individual rights. It's a test of the boundaries of federal power in a divided nation. The military presence in Los Angeles has split public opinion and intensified political divides. Supporters see it as necessary to restore order and protect federal property, pointing to images of chaos as justification. Opponents, including civil liberties groups and immigrant advocates, call it an authoritarian overreach, meant to silence dissent. Governor Newsom and other Democrats accuse Trump of manufacturing a crisis for political gain. Some residents welcome the security, while many in immigrant communities feel targeted and threatened. The debate rages on cable news and social media, reflecting the nation's deep polarization. The deployment has become a symbol in the broader struggle over law, rights, and the direction of the country. Los Angeles faces an uncertain future as legal and political battles continue to unfold, casting a long shadow over the city's daily life. Residents wake each morning to headlines that seem to shift by the hour, unsure of what the next day will bring. The Ninth Circuit's upcoming ruling could either embolden federal intervention or check presidential power, with appeals likely to follow. Legal experts warn that whatever the outcome, the decision will echo far beyond Los Angeles, potentially setting a precedent for the entire nation. On the streets, protests persist, and the military presence has, if anything, intensified tensions. Demonstrators and soldiers now share the same city blocks, their uneasy coexistence a daily reminder of the stakes involved. City officials worry that a single misstep could trigger dangerous escalation. Behind closed doors, leaders debate strategies, balancing public safety with the right to protest, knowing that every decision is under a national microscope. The coming days will reveal whether protests remain peaceful or erupt into direct clashes at federal sites. Tensions simmer as both sides prepare for what could be a pivotal moment in the city's history. The standoff has deepened national divisions and set a precedent for federal-state relations. Across the country, Americans watch closely, aware that the outcome here could influence future conflicts between local and federal authorities. The deployment is now a powerful symbol in debates over immigration, law enforcement, and executive authority. For many, it represents a crossroads, one that will define the boundaries of government power for years to come. How this crisis ends will shape how it's remembered, either as a peaceful resolution or a tragic turning point. The city's collective memory will be marked by the choices made in these critical days. Ultimately, Los Angeles is a test of presidential power, the courts, and the nation's ability to resolve conflict without force. The world is watching to see if dialogue and democracy can prevail over division and unrest. The answer to whether peace and justice can be restored remains unknown, but the decisions made now will echo for generations, shaping not just Los Angeles, but the future of the nation itself.